Hey everyone, welcome to Handing the Shame Back, a channel dedicated to survivors of child sexual abuse everywhere. And it is everywhere. It's partly why we do what we do. This is a channel that talks about and interviews lots of brave survivors from everywhere across the world. And we do by its very nature go into some dark areas. So the trigger warning is always, please, if you do feel yourself get anxious or start getting upset, please stop watching, go to the show notes below. You'll be directed to some resource and some help. In the meantime, another incredible guest, and this time she is from Queensland. She is an author, she is a speaker, she is an advocate, and her name is Deb Aldrick. Welcome to the show, Deb.
Thanks, Gloria. Thank you for having me.
Welcome.
Thank you.
It's always exciting when I get to meet and interview survivors because, you know, just the absolute bravery and the commitment you show to healing and to recovery and to actually helping others is very humbling. So thank you.
And thank you. Thank you so much for having me as well. I really appreciate it.
Okay, so Deb, as with all shows, only as little or as much as you would like to share with us, are you able to please give us an insight into your child sexual abuse experience?
Sure. So my abuse occurred between about the years of when I was about 5 to about 14. It was a family member who abused me, and I also unfortunately had another family member who didn't protect me. So yeah, I went through. I do still remember what I was like when I was little, starting primary school. I was really confident. I was happy, had lots of friends, just enjoyed life. Thought life was fantastic. But then probably about halfway through primary school, things started to change for me. I started becoming quite anxious, a worrier. I will explain that I don't name the people either in my book or when I'm talking. So the person who hurt me, I will call my abuser. The person who didn't protect me, when I was a little girl, I used to think of her as my safe person. But as I've got older, I've actually renamed her as my supposed protector because she didn't protect me. But yeah, so I started really, I think about midway through primary school, clinging to my safe person, the person I thought, was the person that would help me. I didn't understand, as most kids don't, what's going on. I just felt, started to change. I lost a lot of confidence. My self-esteem just flew out the window, and I just was an anxious sort of child who just clung to this person. And unfortunately, by the time I got to high school down in Sydney, Northern Beaches is where I'm from, which starts in grade 7 and 8, about 13, 14 years old, I started regressing as a child. I couldn't go for sleepovers with my friends at my friends' houses. I would get too upset and I'd miss that person that I considered my safe person, or I couldn't go on camps, or anything new triggered me really badly. And it got to the point when I was in grade 7 and 8 that I could barely get myself to school. Yeah, so it just, everything kind of went downhill, and I still then didn't realize why I was acting the way I was or why I was regressing as a kid. But I just had all these fears that, particularly that this safe person was going to die and leave me alone. And then, I'd have nobody to, potentially protect me. So yeah, so that's what it was like. And then we moved to Brisbane, and I got a bit older, and I kind of was able to, I don't know, I kind of became like a chameleon. I tried to just fit into situations with friends and all the rest of it, but I was never really me anymore.
No.
Yeah.
And so, thank you for sharing that. And, the supposed protector in your life, do you feel this person was able to intuit or understand that you were struggling?
Well, see, and I'm not sure, because I feel that there's potentially a lot of further stuff in our family, but I don't know, because this person will never, open up and disclose that to me. But I did disclose to them when I was 10 or 11, and
About what was happening to you?
yeah. So basically, the only thing that they ever let me know was, and this wasn't until they were in their late, elderly sort of 70s, that they found my abuser in my room one night, and they read them the Riot Act, which is kind of like a thing that sort of generation would say. But I've since found out, since writing my book and advocating and everything, which they don't want anything to do with, and they've tried to stop me to do, that they didn't really hold them accountable ever, and they never watched them any further. And they've even said to me, you should have told me it was continuing. So yeah, I know. They just don't get it. They don't get it. And I've tried to sit down every decade almost of my life and talk to this person so that they can understand what happened to me, so that we can have a better relationship as well. But unfortunately, what I found through helping other people and seeing extended family go through stuff and that sort of thing is that the sake of appearances is more important in a whole lot of families, in the intrafamilial abuse sort of stuff. And they don't want to talk about it. They don't want to think about it. They don't want to deal with it. So unfortunately, the victim, the child, the survivor, like myself, just let to dangle out in the wind, heal themselves, get their own, professional help. And,
So it's interesting, because what you're describing is almost a parentified child, where it's your responsibility as the child to make sure the supposed protectors or adults in the family are okay, because they're certainly not doing it for you.
yeah.
And someone's got to do it. So yeah, what do you think of that?
Absolutely. I became a people pleaser. I was the one who put everybody else's feelings and emotions and wants before myself, which has been detrimental in my adult life as well. Let people walk all over me like a doormat, because that's how I was told. That's my place. That's where you are. You're not getting help. I don't think the person who's supposed to protect me, well, particularly if they had something happen to them, which I'm not saying they did, but I'm just assuming, because maybe their generation of parent didn't help them, and then maybe silence them. And, and then they thought that's just how it happens. We don't take these things so seriously. A lot of people call things doctors and nurses, which my psychologist absolutely hates that phrase, because it just diminishes what, happened to you as a child. But I just don't think they could handle the position that they were in. And I'm not excusing them, because I think everybody has the capacity to learn. And it's one of the things which obviously I'm sure you would, promote as well. But I promote to survivors that educating yourself about what happened is paramount in being able to heal. And even if it's through books, I've even seen things on Dr. Phil that's made me go, oh, I didn't participate willingly. I was a child. I didn't have the emotional or intellectual capacity to give consent.
No.
Because a lot of us beat ourselves up for what we didn't do back then, even though we didn't know what was happening.
Well, and it's a really good point you raise. And hello, beautiful survivors. I forgot to say hello to you. Welcome. And the point is this, Deb, and I think you'll love it. There's a reason why most developed countries in the world consider a child to be an adult at the age of 18. And you've just explained it. Yeah. They don't have the capacity to understand, reason, rationalize, make sense of, let alone deal with the trauma that child sexual abuse is. So, that a child can't. It's just not possible. They don't have that cognition.
Yeah. And, when this person said to me, you should have told me, it just made me realize, you should have told me it was continuing. It also made me put in place that, well, you never asked. No. You never checked up. You never stopped this person having access to me.
Mm.
You know, so realistically, don't expect me as a child who, and as you would know too, a lot of us don't even find our voice once. So if we find it once and then you show us that what's happening isn't significant, how are we to find it again?
Well,
Because
almost impossible, because
yeah,
look at the we don't even know, and that's, and if you'd like to share whether you were groomed through manipulation, through flattery, through fear, or how that manifested. But for some of us, we were groomed through absolute fear and threatened that if we ever told, very terrible things would happen. So, Deb, when you think about it, can
yeah.
you then imagine trying to find your voice for the first time, as you just described, and that's the response you get? Why would you ever try again?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, this person who abused me, I looked up to. My supposed protector told me I would follow them around like a little puppy dog, doing whatever they told me. And that really is really telling, you know, because I did look up to this person. I trusted them. I loved them. They were a family member. And that's just a normal thing to do. But what they did was they, you know, they slowly manipulated me. I don't know if they had something happen to them. That's their journey. You know, I don't, but you know, I don't take that into account. But yeah, absolutely. It was slowly done. And as I said, I was about 5, maybe, the first experience. And a lot of my memories, because to me, I was told it was a game, like a secret game. It never happened in front of anyone else. But a lot of my memories come from the humiliation of what this person did or said to me. You know, and a lot of stuff I won't have remembered. Some stuff I would have blocked out. And in fact, after writing my story on Bravehearts, a friend of mine who I only knew through the first 2 years of high school, I didn't know her in primary school, she actually messaged me and said, "Oh, Deb, I've just read your story. I'm so sorry." She said, "But I'm guessing who your abuser was because I saw them do stuff to you." And
Wow.
that's when I was 14. And
Wow.
I don't remember. But she said
Wow.
I'd get really embarrassed and angry and yell at this person. And where was everyone else in my house while this was happening?
Mm. And so there's a couple of things you raised which I think are really powerful. When you're a child, the responsibility for your safety and well-being, let's just imagine, sits solely with the parents or the adults who are tasked with your care, right?
Yeah.
Now, you as a child may not have said the words previous to being grade 7 and 8 or 11 years old. But once you had spoken those words, most normal, loving, protective parents would not have possibly asked you again, but would have observed your behaviour. And everything about you, everything you've described, from the anxiety to the regression to just not really, just wanting to withdraw from everything, is showing us something. It's telling us something, and that is so much more powerful than any words you could have used.
Yeah.
So shame on them for saying you didn't use the words. Deb, you used everything else.
And, you know, so obviously I don't say who this person was, but I will say that I lost a lot of relationship with my dad because he didn't know and he wasn't told. And I sat him down when he was in his early 70s because I finally decided when I was 44 years old, it took me that long. And this is why I want to help other people, because I don't want them to put up with this, you know, family abuse and silencing as long as I did. He was shocked. He didn't know. All the blood drained from his face and he just went pale. But I remember an instance, and I would run up to my room. I would pretend I was sick, anything to get out of, any excuse I could think of to get out of high school. But one day I said to my dad, "I've got to go back up to my room." And he said, "No, I'm not letting you go back up there," because he knew what I was going to do, which was probably lock myself in my room. And so I went to run past him and he grabbed me and he kind of, not in a bad way, but he dragged me down the stairs and said, "I'm going to ring the ambulance to take you to the mental hospital. What is going on?" So, you know, hello,
Yeah.
but between these two people, they should have worked out. And, when you were saying before about was I manipulated, groomed, made to be special, well, all of that. My abuser used coercive control on me, basically, sort of like reeled me in and then, hung me back out to dry sort of thing. And yeah, I just felt under such control from this person. And it wasn't just the sexual component, it was the emotional control, the, physical at times as well. If I did something wrong, all it would take is a look from this person to know I was in trouble.
Wow.
And that did carry on to my adult life.
Yeah.
Being really sensitive to other people's, if I've hurt them in some way or said the wrong thing or done the wrong thing, I would have a very young emotional response, age regression sort of thing. We are sort of stumped at, or, at the age that a lot of stuff happened to us with our emotional responses, which I also speak about in my book in a big way.
Yeah, and I like that you've said that. So thank you so much. You're doing absolutely amazing, Deb.
Thank you.
That you just brought up another little gold nugget for us, which is the age you were when the abuse began is the age you are going to be whenever you're in the company of that person until healing has begun or truth has been admitted to. So there you go.
Yeah. And look, I can't see that ever happening. This person will never admit to what happened to me. I've lost a lot of family members.
Oh, of course. Were you ever able to confront, or did you ever try to?
I did call them once,
Yeah.
and such an emotional response. Even before I dialed their number, I had to hang up a number of times because I just started bawling. So it was really hard, and I did bring up what happened, and they just sort of minimized it. Don't know what you're talking about, and then kind of made it all about them. And I never really got my voice with them. I was still that little girl who, and I did that because I've had so many health issues in my life, mental health struggles, just other physical health struggles too, and particularly IBS with my stomach. That really started when I was in primary school. I was up at the nurse's room so many times with stomach pains and didn't know what was going on, and that continued right through my life. That my brain, the enteric nervous system, straight down to my stomach, and that would really make it hard for me to go out, to go on holidays, the things that everybody else, loves and experiences, great joy in doing. Okay. That was hard for me. And there's so much, as you would know, that it doesn't just happen when we're little, it just changes our whole life. And we struggle with so many things, whether it's substance abuse, addiction, being extra sexualized, risky behaviors, getting into domestic violence situations because we don't think we deserve better. Just, it changes us so much. And I want the general public to know that. And that's one of the reasons I have started advocating, because people like my supposed protectors say really ignorant things like, oh, well, didn't it just happen when you were little? Like you were supposed to have gotten over it by now or something.
And that's quite a common thing you say, actually. And I was just thinking about that earlier. So it's really interesting to talk about that. There is a little myth out there for those that are non-survivors who think, well, when do you think you'll be over it? Or do you still need to keep talking about it? Or, oh, but wasn't that years ago? Or fill in the gaps. And of course, for us as survivors, including you ones watching, I'm watching you, is that whatever words they choose to use will never, ever cut through the amount of trauma and the levels of trauma and the types of trauma we experience, because it's a physiological attack. It's everything. It attacks our soul, our spirit, our body, our mind, our self-esteem, the way we interact, the way we see the world, everything has changed. And
even like particularly breathing, even like I'm such a shallow breather because, you know, from such an early age, I was kind of in fear. So, you know, everything was heightened in my body, you know, and my husband will take or three, no, I'll take 2 or 3 breaths to his 1 breath. And that was one thing he kind of noticed really early on. You know, I'm always on high alert. And, you know, I have done things to help with that, but I pretty much was just a little Energizer bunny my whole life. I had to keep going because if I stopped, I'd have to think about things. So a lot of us do that as well. We just fill our days with things to do so that we can't be in that, you know, quiet space in our own head to have to deal with it and push it down. Pushing it down is one of the big things that a lot of survivors do. And one of the chapters in my book, I equate it to kind of having a rubber ducky in the bath as a kid. You can push it under the water, but it won't stay there. It'll always pop up. And, you know, if we haven't got to our 30s and 40s and dealt with it in a really healthy and healing way, it's going to come out in some way. And people around us are going to go, who the, you know, whether we start drinking, you know, or getting angry or, you know, just taking our frustration out on our family or just, you know, being depressed, anxiety, panic attacks, it's going to come out. We have to deal with it.
Well, the thing, it's a little known fact, but I love how you're describing all this, because the thing, survivors, that you may not know is that our mind is always leading us to healing, always leading us to healing. So even though we may think, I don't want to think about that again.
Yeah.
If it's for your healing, it's going to keep coming up. And if you ignore it, if you get shoulder tapped and you decide, I don't want to deal with this, great. But the next day or the next minute or the next month, you're going to get whacked. And at some point, you're going to have to deal with it. So yeah. I think that's what Deb is trying to say, aren't you, Deb? That deal with it if you can, with lots of love and support. You know, obviously you had a friend in your childhood, adolescence who knew what was happening or felt she saw what was happening. Did you ever try and tell anybody apart from family members?
You know, I just reconnected with 2 other friends that I had when I was 16 up in Brisbane, and we hadn't really seen each other for 30 years. And one of them said to me, why didn't you tell me? And I wrote a blog about it, about why we don't tell our friends. And, you know, I was ashamed. I felt guilt. At that point in my life, you know, I'd only just worked out that what happened to me was sexual abuse, but I also had so much doubt in my own head about, well, why didn't I stop them? And there were points in time when they were doing things to me that I wasn't, you know, I was never comfortable, but at times I did say, no, please don't. And they, you know, made these things still happen. So I do know I stood up for myself at some points, but I was so ashamed. I didn't want anybody to know. And this person actually held something over me. They were really sneaky, and they came in my room and they saw me doing something, which I won't go into too much detail of, but it's just a normal thing that kids do at some point in time. And they threatened to tell everybody at my primary school what they caught me doing. So it's this power that they have over you. Yeah. You know, this manipulation and control, even though they were sexualizing me and abusing me, they were threatening to hurt me in another way. And this is how I became so damaged as a person.
And I think that's really worth unpacking. But we've come to the end of part 1. Deb, stay right there. Audience, you know, there's always so much to this. There's layers upon layers as you experience in your own life. So take that as validation or vindication that what you went through is true, and that you did experience everything you say you did. You know, so grateful to Deb, and we're just at the end of part 1. So don't go away, because we are coming back with part 2. But I'll just leave you with this, because I know you like to hear it. I see you. I stand beside you, and I believe you. Hey everyone, welcome back to Handing the Shame Back, a channel dedicated to survivors of child sexual abuse. Get to interview some amazing people from all over the world, and it's always such a pleasure and privilege to do so. And to you, amazing survivor family that watch, I know you get a lot out of it because you are so generous in your feedback. So we're back with part 2, but just before I launch in, there is a trigger warning, and there is that for the purpose of protecting you. If you see something that upsets you or makes you feel anxious, stop watching, go to the show notes below, and you'll be directed to some resource and support. So we've got Deb Aldrick back with us. Now, she's from Queensland, beautiful Brisbane, Queensland, lovely and warm over there. She is an author, a speaker, and an advocate, and she's going to tell us all about her book before we finish the interview. But in the meantime, let's go back to where we left off. Deb, welcome back.
Thanks, Gloria.
So, yeah, just as we were finishing part 1, we recognise that there's so many layers to this. It's never just about sexual abuse. In fact, I think you use the words power and control. How were you able to, once the abuse stopped, and be interested to know how that actually stopped? And then how were you able to then start your healing and recovery from this?
Yeah, so as I said before, 14 was about the last time that I was let know. I didn't think it had continued to that age, but it must have, because this friend of mine told me, and she was about that age when we knew each other. I think I just started standing up for myself a little bit more, getting angrier at this person. I remember when I was 18, this person just asked me to do something just minimal, which was take some videos back, which back in the days, that's what we had, videos. And I told them no, and they started telling me just do it, using expletives, just effing do it. And a huge fight, verbal fight started, and my supposed protector once again told me, just go and do it. And I just refused. And these were the things that, I could not let this person control me one more day. I still did have them in my life because I still hadn't let what I thought was my secret, but I now know is my story. It's their secret. I still hadn't let people know about that, so I couldn't really deal with them properly. But there were times where they very much triggered me, and I would explode. But it wasn't until a psychologist actually said to me when I was in my early 40s, you don't have to see this person. You know that, don't you, Deb? And I just looked at her and went, how am I going to do that? That's going to blow up my whole family. Like, how do I do that? And I just kind of put it to the back of my mind for a while. And then I started thinking about it, and I thought, she's right. I don't have to continue to see this person. And whatever repercussions come of it, they do. And it was for me losing people out of my life because, I told my truth and found my self-respect for the first time, really. But it has, as I said, blown up my part of my family, and I don't see this person anymore. And unfortunately, a few years ago, when I started writing my book and advocating for, adult survivors of child sexual abuse to speak up, take their power back, end the silence, particularly intrafamilial abuse, where we are silenced by our extended family because they can't deal with it. My supposed protector came over one day, and I told them what I was doing, and they said, no, you can't do that. And I said, well, I am, and I'm going to. And that was the last time I physically seen this person. And, they've reached out to me at different times, and I've said, no, until you're willing to respect me, until you're willing to stop putting the secret, my abuser, in, ahead of me, then we don't have a relationship. And even it was my birthday a couple of weeks ago, and I got a card in the mail from this person, and I'm just like, because what I've explained through another family member to tell this person is every time they reach out to me, it hurts me. They're not doing anything for me by sending me a birthday card. They're actually hurting me. because they're reminding me that we don't have a relationship because they've chosen to protect this person. And I think that's very important for survivors and family and friends of survivors to understand that it has such a huge impact on us, whether you believe us, whether, you know, you validate what's happened to us, or whether you try and brush it under the rug. Because if you try and brush it under the rug, you're killing us a little bit more inside each time. Because once again, you're saying what you went through, what you felt all your life, all the damage that was done is not significant. Get over it, deal with it, move on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And we don't. Well, we do in a way. We heal, but we're never exactly that person that we were born to be. They took that away from us.
Yeah.
And that, you know, that makes me very angry, because I lost all the confidence that I had as a little girl. I would have definitely pursued a different career if I had more self-esteem and confidence. But I left school at the end of grade 10 because I didn't feel like I was smart enough. Had all this, you know, doubt in my mind. And then I became a teenage mum when I was 19. Once again, let men use and abuse me, because that's what I was groomed and, you know, taught to be. Let other people get what they want out of me and, you know, people please.
Yeah. And a pattern has been set, Deb. So you're just following, you know, we are templated with how we are treated. So it becomes very difficult then to become this confident child that you started out life as being.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think too, I interviewed actually from your region, Christy McPhee. Do you know?
Oh,
Christy?
yeah, I know Christy. Yeah.
And I interviewed her on the show, and she talked about having, you know, how as a detective and a forensic one, she would look at cases as they came in. And she said, look, murder is terrible, but it's one and done. It's over. Child sexual abuse, impact goes on for the rest of that child's life and that person's life. The reality is, not only does it go on, Deb, I believe, but for each of us as individuals, it's unique in how it impacts us.
Absolutely.
And so there's layers upon layers, and to then be shut down or minimized, or people want us to go away and stop bringing this up because it's difficult for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And,
No.
And the intrafamilial stuff, if the abuser doesn't get held to account then and there, whether it's a sibling, whether it's a parent, grandfather, cousin, whatever role it is, they will go on.
Yes.
And they're given that, green light. It's like letting a murderer off. They get a taste for it. They know they're not getting punished or held account, particularly the family stuff, because it's the secret that they're holding. And the whole reason I named my book Circling the Wagons was because I came to find with all these people, whether they were friends or other people that I knew, there was one significant sameness, that's not a word, but similarity is that all of these abusers weren't being held to account. And I just started to think, why? And because of the family dynamic, it's not actually the abusers they're protecting as such, it's the secret. And the family circles the secret, and which in turn protects the abuser. And us as victims or survivors are on the outside of this wagon train, left under attack kind of thing. So that's how I came up with the name Circling the Wagons, and that's what I came to find in real life. If we're abused by a neighbor or a guy down the road or whatever, we would receive help and healing. We'd get psychologist appointments, we'd be protected, and we'd be supported by our family. But because it's the closeness of who our abuser was to the people who are supposed to protect us, we don't get that.
I think too, it's also that people struggle with the concept that a family member would do that, or have the inclination to do that, or to even be styled in that way as a child that's related to them. So I think it's there's so many complexities to it and so many layers to it. And,
Yeah.
you know, I guess what I would like to know is, as we're moving on, is, you know, what has helped you in your healing? I know you wrote your book. What else helped you? Therapy.
Obviously, you know, I've been to professional psychologists, and, you know, that has helped to a certain extent, but, you know, having 3 kids, working, you can only do so much at certain points, I think. And, you know, each psychologist gives you a little bit more. It's like peeling an onion, my GP said to me. You peel off a little bit more of a layer to get to, you know, a little bit more healing each time. But exercise for me has been paramount, because the stress and the tenseness that I would get in my body, I just had to get rid of. And, you know, going for walks or Pilates, whatever, going to the gym has really helped me. But meditation, which I've taken up the last few years to help my breathing, you know, slow it down, calm me, and even just, you know, the words that they say in it are just, you know, healing at times as well, with meditation apps. But also talking to other people, that's my healing. This is why, you know, I want to talk to people like you, and, you know, and put stuff on social media and tell people about my book. I make very little out of my book, and that was not the purpose of me ever publishing. And I self-published because that was kind of the quickest way to get it out there. And I had so many people, once I told them, going, I want to read it, I want to give it to my friend, I want to give it to my family member. So I self-published it, you know, just to get as much healing as I could out there. And one thing I have always struggled with is trying to explain to my supposed protector verbally how, you know, everything has impacted me, because they didn't want to hear about what happened or feel guilty or shame themselves. So at the back of my book, I've actually left 5 or 6 lined pages that are blank. And I did that because I want survivors to be able to write their story at the end. And if they have somebody in their life like I do, who doesn't get it, who, you know, you have a big blow up with because their ignorant response just, you know, makes you angry, then they can read my book and see all the ways that I explain, you know, that we've been impacted and damaged. And then they can get to the end, and that survivor, you know, can write their story. And hopefully by the end, that family member will have a bit more education and knowledge about what we all go through. And then they'll be able to look at that survivor's story with that education and go, oh, I get it now.
Oh, that's brilliant. What a gift.
So that's, you know, that's one of the big things. And throughout writing the book, people would say things to me and I'd say, oh, that's great. That's a good point. I'm going to talk about that, you know, how it's impacted, you know, my husband, my children, because as you say, it doesn't just stop. You know, I became the helicopter mum, you know, watching who their friends were, parents of friends, you know, siblings of friends.
So what are you doing now? You've written your book, you speak to that. What else do you do in this space?
I spoke recently. My local shire is called Moreton Bay, and they have a Moreton Bay Says No to Violence every year. And I sat and watched it last year, and I'm friends with one of the people from a domestic violence organisation who does this. And I contacted them and I said, I want to speak and I want to open up intrafamilial childhood sexual abuse being a form of domestic violence, because it is. Domestic means home. Sexual abuse is violence. Why do we not talk about this in our events and rallies? It's taboo, I know that, but I'm trying my hardest to bring this horrible, yucky subject out to the public. So I spoke in front of about 500 people. That was the first time I'd ever done that. I have been in newspapers in our local area, and I held a Brave Hearts event last year, which I was a survivor story for that month, just to kind of start opening the dialogue, because I know it's a yucky subject. I know people don't want to talk about it, but when we don't talk about it, it continues on. And then that next child is abused, or that next survivor takes their life.
And the other thing too is, and you said it earlier, that the more that people feel they can get away with this, the more likely they are to keep doing it. So the thing is, if you are, if you're an abuser who likes abusing children and you've managed to get away with it, police tell me there can be as much as 50 victims per abuser. So, this is not a problem that can afford to be ignored. And
I know there was 3 for my abuser because people have come forward and told me. And
there could even be more. But yeah. So that's the point. They get away with it, then they continue, and I think the silence only serves the abuser or the predator. And of course, your non-protector in your family, she actually that's on her a little bit, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is. And it's a real shame because, I have tried to speak to them all throughout my life, as I said, and I kept letting them get off the hook as well. I wanted them to come to, sorry.
Yeah, well, you did. You did, but let's be clear. I'm not going to let you get away with that, Deb. You thought you could, but you can't. Look, when you are in a situation where you are the person that is being abused or put upon, and you have people complicit through their non-action, they saw something and did nothing, they suspected something and did nothing, they heard something and did nothing, which is all through your childhood, the reality is the weight of that responsibility rests with them. You were the child, and if you saw a photo of yourself now as that beautiful little 5-year-old, you would say to me, "What'd she have done?" So
I've got a dedication at the start of my book, actually, and I do dedicate it to all other survivors, but I do dedicate it to the little girl in me who was silenced.
Good. Now, I want to know, so you're doing this work now, which is amazing, and you're helping a lot of people. So kudos to you and much respect to you.
Thank you.
For that. Is there, are you able to show us your book? Are you able to,
Sure.
How can people,
Oh, okay. Don't know if that's the best light, but.
Hold it back.
Back.
Yeah. And that's better. Certainly.
So, I as I said, I self-published, and that's the back of my book as well. It's got a little healing heart at the back of it. But I picked these things because I didn't, I wanted it to be bright and light, and I wanted it to be pretty in a way, although it's not a pretty subject. I just, when I picked that, there is a little wagon wheel because it's called Circling the Wagons, and it's got a little, pink ribbon streaming off it to kind of represent that little girl who was left behind. And there's a lot of, poems in my book. I've done quotes. It's just a lot of, I don't know, positive kind of reinforcement as well. Although I do speak about how, this has impacted us. I don't speak of the acts themselves. I don't feel like I need to take a survivor back there. There is a thing about grooming, and that's more just to let parents know, because this is also a book for red flags, for parents of children as well, to see changes, to see how these predators and perpetrators can groom your children. But I just use a lot of examples that people can relate to throughout the book.
And I love that you do that. And as you're talking, I'm thinking about what, the content and the diversity with what, the approach, the incredible multi-layered really approach. What advice would you give to survivors who may be struggling or new to their memory and recall? Is there any advice you would give them?
Yeah, absolutely. One, if you're not seeing a professional, psychologist, psychiatrist, counsellor, start seeing one straight away. But the main thing that has helped me is finding that self-respect, that you do not need to see this person who has hurt you. You do not need to go to the, Christmas dinner or whatever and sit there next to Uncle Bob who, did something to you. You do not need to do that. And if mum or dad get angry at you, then that's their problem. We need to do whatever is in the best interest of our help, in our healing. And if that means distancing yourself from family members, although it will be hard, and I know that because I have struggled so much, you're not going to be the real you. You're not going to find the real you. And I didn't find this, I didn't think I could write a poem. I didn't think I could write a book. And it wasn't until I distanced myself from these people and stopped having them keep me down and silence me that I found my potential. And I want that for every other survivor out there. I want us to find what we're passionate about, and also helping and talking to other people. Once you do find that helps me. That is one of my biggest healing things. And, my husband kind of said to me, "Oh, you've written the book now." And I went, yeah, no, it's all done now, And he goes, "It'll never be done for you." And I'm like, "Oh, no, that's it." And I went, no. And I started a website because I wanted people to also be able to reach out anonymously and read my blogs, look at things, that I've done, watch my speech from the domestic violence. I want them to have an outlet, particularly teenagers. I felt very isolated as a teenager, had no one to speak to, because you're too young to see a psychologist, really. If your parent doesn't listen to you, or if you can't find the words, then who have you got? So I've just started on TikTok as well, because I know there's a lot of teenagers on there.
That's incredible. So, Deb, where is the link to your book? Can you send that to me so I can put it in our show notes, please? But also
Absolutely.
Tell us now, where can they find it?
Yes. So anybody in Australia can buy it through my website.
Yep.
But for overseas, just the postage itself is too expensive. So I would suggest people just Google "Circling the Wagons, Deborah Aldrick," and it should come up on Amazon, Barnes and Noble.
Okay.
Ingram Sparks, who I've published, and they print it on demand. So all these other different retailers will buy it online.
Okay.
So it's not in bookstores. I've just got it in my local library, which I was really proud that they accepted it. So
Good.
people can read it for free. And that's, as I said, I'm not here to make money. I'm here to help other people, and that helps me.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Look at her big heart, survivors. Amazing. So what's your website, Deb? Tell us.
It's dragonflyadvocacy.com.au.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And so people can find your resources and your
Yes.
blogs and your book, link to your book and all of that there. That's
They
amazing.
can also contact me on there if they want to reach out and, speak to me or whatever. I'm on Facebook, Dragonfly Advocacy, for that. I'm on Dragonfly Advocacy 3 for Instagram, LinkedIn, Deborah Aldrick, and TikTok is Dragonfly Advocacy as well.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So, Deb, is there anything you haven't shared, just as we're closing? Is there anything you haven't shared that you would like to?
I'd just like to say, and this is probably more directed at parents who see something, or they're parents of a survivor, that it is so important, well, mostly for kids probably, to get the child help when they're young. And if they think at any point that this is all going to go away, as I mentioned, it's not. And the parent may well be the one that the child is most angry with. Our protectors are people who are supposed to protect us, if our parents don't step up when we're younger, because the detriment to our mental and physical health will continue on throughout our life. And you just, I know you spoke to John Cartermine, and his mum did step up and help him, and, good on her.
Yeah.
She's such a wonderful person to help him.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, it doesn't always happen. And although he's still advocating for survivors, which is absolutely great, he had a different experience to a lot of us. So yeah, that's the biggest, I think, message I would send out to people is you need to help your child. You need to put their well-being over the fact that maybe you're with this guy who you like, or, it's a close relationship. It doesn't matter. You have to help them.
I'm sorry, it's a no-brainer, isn't it?
Well, you'd think so.
Yeah. But look, I just want to say from me to you, thank you so much for gracing us with your presence today. It's been such an honour. Please,
it's a pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me, Gloria.
Welcome. Please do stay right there. Okay. Audience, Deb's raised lots of really useful and valuable, thought-provoking information for us, and Isn't that amazing? And look, she said many things, but one of the things that stuck with me is you do not need to see your abuser. You do not need to be made to feel bad or guilty or wrong because you choose not to be in their presence. And I just want to say, to me, that's really, really powerful. Finding your self-respect, as Deb said, can come through setting those limits. And I know it's hard, but just thank you to Deb for raising that. A beautiful point. As always, lovely ones, I see you. I stand beside you.